Okay, I'm going to go through the top 5 troubleshooting tips to help people that are starting with Photoshop. So this is really for beginners. Now what you'll find the first time is you're probably working on the wrong layer. That's the first tip. As an example, if I wanted to add some whiskers just for a bit of fun, I'll click on my brush tool, and all of a sudden you can see just in the middle there you've got that symbol that says you can't do anything to this layer. It's because I've got my layer selected here, which is obviously a text layer, but when I click on this layer now, which is my top layer, I can now add the whiskers on like so. Okay, so that's tip number 1, making sure that you're on the right layer. Tip number 2 is layer position. Now I want to go through and work on my type, but you notice if I start creating a new layer, I'm going to type in here King of the, and all of a sudden you see that there's something been typed there, but you can't see it at all. It's because what's happened is that this text layer is underneath this other layer. So because of that, you need to make sure that you've actually got the right layer position. Okay, that was tip number 2. Tip number 3, an active selection. Sometimes you'll be working and deciding I need to add a gradient across here, but you might have started off by editing something else. As an example, I may have been working on here just to enhance the eyes. Later on I go, okay, I'll put a gradient down the bottom here. Now I go to my gradient tool, I try to add a gradient, but as you can see, no matter how many times I try to put the gradient, nothing happens. It's because that active selection there is only working in that little area. So sometimes you need to be careful, not knowing exactly where things are. So that's tip number 3, active selection. Your active selection can actually make things quite difficult. To get rid of that active selection, if you press Ctrl D or Command D on a Mac, you can go up to Select and Deselect. Now when I put my gradient in, you can see it's actually put the gradient there because I don't have an active selection. Okay, moving on to the next one. Commit whilst it's still open. Now with this, if I was to press Ctrl T, see I can make some changes here. I can make this a bit smaller. If I decide I want to go on to do something else and I want to try to paint, it's going to come up with this warning saying you have to apply the transformation before you can do anything else. So make sure that you do that as well. And another area where you'll see this is when you're using the type tool. So I'm going to use the type tool here. Up the top here you'll see this little tick that says do you want to commit to what you're doing. You won't be able to do any other editing to any other layer until you've actually selected that. So make sure you select that. That's tip number 4. Okay, tip number 5 is editing text. Now as you can see, I've got this text down here. I know it's there, so I'll select my layer. You'll probably be on the move tool and you go, hang on, I want to edit this text. I can't edit it. Like a normal word processing document, you just highlight it and you can edit it. But you can't do that in Photoshop. What you need to do is double click on the layer thumbnail, and that will allow you to get back in, and then you can edit your text. Now, the tip on a tip for here is if you click on your character palette, you find you've got more options. So some of the other things you can do, quickly just change the color, just so it's a nice white color like so. Nothing you can do with this if you're on top of any of these information palettes. So for instance, this is the tracking. If I click and drag on there, you can see I can make changes quite easily. Same thing with any of these things. So instead of always clicking on auto, you'll notice that the highest here is 200. Now if I want to go beyond that, you can type it in, but the quicker way is just to click and drag, so you can define exactly how you'd like it just by using that. Okay, so they're the 5 top tips or troubleshooting tips just to help you get through some of the pain that you might have with Photoshop.